Good evening, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown in Shenzhen, China for another China Rising Radio Sinoland podcast. A little unusual in that it is not directly related to China, but I felt like that the incredible mass hysteria and propaganda in the U.S. and Europe and the West and overall against Donald Trump is very newsworthy, and I wanted to share with you all some of my thoughts and impressions. The title of this podcast is called "The Uncanny Similarities Between Presidents Donald Trump and Franklin Delano Roosevelt," and it starts out, "For the record, I voted for Donald Trump. Not that I was in love with the guy. It was really a matter of default. On the Oklahoma state ballot, I had the choice of Hillary, quote, crimes against humanity, plus here comes World War III, end of quote, Clinton, the Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson, and Mr. Trump. I chose Trump, a populist, sometimes demagogue and buffoon, but a real outsider who might shake the establishment up. It's still early, but no one can say that the first 2 weeks of Trump's administration have been boring or predictable. He loudly called the outgoing CIA director John Brennan a liar and said that the agency's Russia dossier was all fake news. John F. Kennedy said just as much in private and paid the ultimate price for his honesty. Trump has apparently kept his own private security services since getting elected to avoid the same fate as JFK. President Trump canceled the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, which was bad for everybody involved except the transnational corporations who bribed, extorted, and blackmailed some pac-rim countries into signing on. But even America's corporate-owned Senate and Congress were resisting. Why? Because a signatory country gives up its national sovereignty to a corporate-picked, quote, International Arbitration Commission, end of quote. Under the TPP, any company can take any country's laws to this supposedly unbiased group of corporate jocks and claim that these laws are a, quote, infringement on trade. Think GMOs, agricultural chemicals, cultural and religious laws, subsidies to promote national industries and infrastructure, media and internet regulations, medicine and Social Security, environmental worker and civilian safety laws, taxation, and on and on. Once this unelected corporate board rules against any and all national laws, then the signatory country's legislature is required to abolish those laws and regulations in the name of, quote, free trade, end of quote. So, Mr. Trump, thank you for canceling this Orwellian, plutocratic corporatocracy. I can assure you Baba Beijing wants nothing to do with it. China's leaders want to govern and help their people, not be tyrannized and humiliated by faceless transnational corporations. I watched Trump's Inauguration Day speech. I also watched Trump's press conference with small and medium-sized business owners, and in both cases I was amazed at the similarities between him and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was in the White House from 1933 to 1945. The first observation that really struck me is how much Trump genuinely cares about the little guy. It's not phony. He really does want to help the people in America who have been disenfranchised from having a voice in their destiny, something that has been building up for quite a long time. FDR was just as sincere about helping all the millions of hungry, homeless, and jobless Americans during the Great Depression. The U.S. had to wait 8 years after the great financial crash of 2008, also known as the Great Middle Class Gangbang, for populist Trump to ride to the rescue. Both presidents came from wealthy backgrounds, with the proverbial silver spoon in their mouths. FDR's family made its fortune via the organized crime opium cartel in China 1839 to 1949. Trump's father was a big construction slumlord and real estate tycoon in New York City. He was investigated on numerous occasions for illegal business practices. You don't succeed in these Big Apple business sectors and not be in the good graces of the mafia. Using his patrician family's name, FDR worked his way up to the top of the American political system to eventually become president. Donald Trump used his father's wealth and connections to work his way up the corporate and media ladder to eventually occupy the White House. Both men are, quote, rich, fat, and happy, and I'm going to use the present tense for both of them for comparison, for simplicity, even though they live generations apart. Both men are, quote, rich, fat, and happy, end of quote, to use the expression, and do not have to make all the sacrifices and take all the risks to run the United States, but both have their principles, ideas, and visions for the future. Both men want to put Americans back to work again and reignite the country's industrial potential. Both men are disgusted with the usurious, rapacious, private Federal Reserve banking system. FDR complained bitterly about the Fed in his private writings, and only obliquely so in public. Trump is more vocal and seems less intimidated by the elite banking families, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Morgan, Carnegie, and Company, the real owners of the United States and Europe. JFK was circumventing the Fed by having the Treasury Department mint what were known as silver certificate bills outside the purvey of the Fed banks, another reason he lived a very short life. With his purported private security forces keeping him safe from the CIA, maybe Trump feels just as safe from the agency's historical deep state partners, the aforementioned oil bankers. Both men have a strong vision for what ails the country. For FDR, it was the New Deal. For Trump, it is put Americans first. Both men are despised by the elites. Both men are proud of it, too. FDR famously said he welcomed the hatred of Wall Street. Trump has repeatedly threatened and is starting to act on his promise to, quote, drain the swamp in Washington, end of quote. Both men take the choice of Supreme Court justices very seriously, and both have a chance to really change the political leanings on the bench. For FDR, it was to make the Supreme Court more liberal. For Trump, it will be to make it more socially conservative, yet both believe their choices will be better for the betterment of the citizens. Both men know how to relate to their constituencies, the man and the woman on the street, the little guy and gal, Joe and Jane Sixpack. FDR ruled the radio waves with his famous fireside chats, bucking up the populace to work hard, stay positive, and look forward to better times. Trump is a brilliant manager of the media and does not hesitate to take his populist message to his base via social media such as Twitter and Facebook. As a result, both presidents' voters love them and are not hesitant to let everybody know that fact. Conversely, both presidents have a big chunk of the electorate who despise them. For Trump, it is the wealthy elites and the liberals. For FDR, it was these same elites, but the other group was middle America, conservative and Christian voters. So in essence, FDR and Trump have kept the wrath and indignation of the ruling princes of power, but have switched sides on Main Street, making a very interesting dynamic for sure. Both men talk about keeping America safe from external enemies. FDR ended up getting the U.S. into World War II, ostensibly to do just that. The jury is still out on how aggressive Trump will be in dropping bombs and drones on thousands of innocent Muslims across the planet in the name of fighting, quote, Islamic terrorism, end of quote. As a result of getting into World War II, FDR greatly increased the size and technology of the U.S. military. Trump says he, too, wants to greatly expand the military budget and make it, quote, unbeatable, end of quote. Both presidents believe in Keynesian deficit spending to boost the economy. FDR greatly expanded government programs to help the downtrodden, as well as turn the U.S. into a war economy with World War II. Trump wants to spend lavishly on the military and dramatically lower taxes on business, just like a country at war, while going into even deeper debt than the already official $20 trillion void Americans are on the hook for. Both FDR and Trump want to work with Russia. Roosevelt and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin had a good working relationship together. Trump is signaling his desire to work on the positive side of the ledger with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In part due to his family's historical role of, quote, working, end of quote, in China, in fact selling illegal drugs, FDR had a fancy for this country. In his own way, he strived to make China a part of the post-war Western world order, but with all the historical colonialist imperialist baggage in tow, he was doomed to fail. This is why a guy by the name of Mao Zedong came along with a better idea for his people. Trump has been all over the place with China, saying he wants to, quote, cut a deal with President Xi Jinping, end of quote, and raise tariffs 45% across the board. But mixing in Taiwan and threatening to upturn the one China policy, which if pushed to the extreme could cause World War III. Here's to hoping that Trump takes a fancy to the People's Republic like Roosevelt, but without all the great game, imperial megalomania, and cupidity. These amazing corollaries between Presidents Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Donald Trump will surely grow as Trump's presidency takes root. It's going to be an interesting next 4 to 8 years indeed. And dare I say, like my grandparents did during the 1930s, that it's a time for hope? This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, signing out from beautiful Shenzhen, China. Good night.